She returned a lost keychain at 2 a.m. She didn't ask for anything. She never imagined it belonged to a single-dad CEO who hadn't smiled in years. What followed was not a love story, but something deeper. A reminder that the smallest kindness can rewrite a life. Subscribe now to follow every chapter of this soul-healing journey. Portland, Oregon, 1:52 a.m. The scent of floor wax, metal, and damp concrete hung heavy in the air like the silent echoes inside the 40-story tower in downtown. Rachel Monroe didn't hear the radio in her earbuds anymore, only the wet squeak of the mop bucket trailing behind her. She worked for a contracted janitorial service, always on the night shift. Every night. The glass tower rose too high for anyone to notice someone like her. And though she was scrubbing the executive levels, no one ever knew her name. Floor 23. Rachel paused when something flashed under the emergency light near the stairwell exit. She pulled out an earbud, bent down. It was an old keychain with a worn plastic charm, a stick figure in a cape, drawn by a child. Scrawled beside it, "Come home safe, Dad." Rachel felt her heart jolt. Something in the wide-eyed innocence of the drawing made her pause. There was a phone number on the back, faded but still legible. No name, no logo, just numbers. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was low, surprised. "I found something on the 23rd floor," Rachel said, trying to sound casual, though her hand trembled slightly. A pause, then, "That's mine, thank you. Where are you?" "Near the parking garage. Could we meet there in about 20 minutes? "I'll be there." 20 minutes later, Rachel stood near the security desk in the underground garage. The keychain pressed into her palm like a fragile truth. He appeared from the shadows. Tall, hoodie pulled low, jeans. Calm voice. "You called?" Rachel nodded and handed over the keychain. "I nearly stepped on it," she said, voice quiet. He took it like she had handed back a missing piece of his soul. His fingers brushed over the charm, and he exhaled deeply. "I'm Evan," he said after a beat. "Rachel. My daughter made this when she was 3. She's 5 now, but every morning she checks to see if I have it." Rachel smiled softly. "She sounds fierce." Silence settled, heavy but not awkward. "Good night, Evan." "Good night, Rachel." As the elevator doors closed, Rachel felt something shift quietly in her chest. She'd just returned a stranger's memory, maybe even his hope. And she had no idea that the story had only just begun, on a forgotten floor of a sleepless city. 4 nights passed. Rachel didn't expect to see him again. People in that building, especially men who wore hoodies in garages and talked about daughters, didn't circle back. But as she pushed her mop bucket onto floor 15, she heard it. Not the hum of computers or elevator chimes, but footsteps, steady, deliberate, familiar. She turned the corner. There he was, sitting near the window by the emergency stairwell, same hoodie, same stillness. But his posture had changed, open, waiting. Rachel blinked. "You again." Evan shrugged lightly. "Just doing my rounds, night guard duties." She raised an eyebrow. "Since when do night guards wear Nikes and carry espresso thermoses?" He grinned. "Budget cuts. No uniform." Rachel fought a smile and lost. He patted the bench beside him. "Break time. I promise I won't write you up." She hesitated, just a breath, then sat. "What if I write you up instead?" He tilted his head. "I'd accept it, but only if you let me explain the coffee situation." He handed her a cup, still warm. Chamomile. He remembered. They sipped in silence, the city lights casting shadows against the glass. Rachel smelled like citrus cleaner and paperbacks. Evan noticed. "You always start on this floor?" he asked. She nodded. "Best air circulation. Doesn't smell like burnt toner." He chuckled. "Smart." A beat. "What's your end goal, Rachel? You don't want to mop floors forever." She glanced sideways, surprised at his softness. "I want to open a bookstore. Used books. Maybe a tea bar. No Wi-Fi. Just stories." He stared, genuinely impressed. "You've thought this through." "Every inch, even the chalkboard menu. I've drawn it 100 times in my head." "I'd go there," he said quietly. She looked at him. "I read to my daughter," he said, sipping. "Every night. She won't sleep without a story, usually dragons or ballet dancing bears." Rachel laughed. "She sounds like she runs the house." "She does. I just pay the bills." Their laughter echoed gently. "Are we breaking protocol loitering like this?" she asked in a mock whisper. He widened his eyes. "Extremely. I've already filed 3 complaints against myself." She chuckled, covering her mouth. "If anyone sees you, they might ask you to fix a broken light bulb." He feigned horror. "Please, don't ruin my disguise." The floor felt less sterile, the city less hollow. Rachel stood. "I have 10 more floors. You should get back to pretending to be useful." Evan stood too. "Then I'll keep pretending tomorrow." She turned, then paused. "Same time?" "Same time," he said. As she disappeared down the hallway, Evan reached into his hoodie pocket, touched the old keychain, and smiled. They didn't know what this was yet, but it was growing, like trust sown between mopped tiles and warm tea, and they were both just curious enough to let it. The next evening, Rachel arrived at work 10 minutes earlier than usual. She didn't tell herself why. She didn't need to. When she stepped off the service elevator on the 15th floor, she noticed the paper cup before she saw him. Perched carefully on the handle of her cleaning cart, steam still curling from the lid. A yellow sticky note was taped to the side. "No dragons tonight, just chamomile. You looked tired yesterday." Rachel stood there, reading the note twice. She didn't smile, not exactly, but something around her eyes softened. She lifted the cup and inhaled. Still warm, still familiar. "You're early," a voice said. She turned. Evan was already sitting in their usual spot, legs stretched out, hoodie sleeves rolled up. The glow from the vending machine cast a soft blue tint across his face. "So are you," she replied. He gestured around. "I don't really sleep much." Rachel walked over and sat beside him. "You ever get tired of hiding?" He tilted his head. "You mean the hoodie or the rest of it?" "Both," she said. He exhaled slowly. "Yeah. More than I admit." She took a sip of tea, then spoke again without looking at him. "My dad left when I was 10. Said he was going out for gas. Never came back." Evan didn't move, just listened. "Mom got sick a year later. First, just tired all the time. Then worse. I dropped out, got a job cleaning. Haven't stopped." She paused, then added in a low voice, "I don't even know what I'd say if I saw him again. Maybe nothing. Maybe just, why'd you make me think men disappear?" Evan's voice was steady but soft. "I don't have an answer. But I can tell you this. I almost became that man, too." Rachel turned to look at him. His eyes were downcast, hands clasped together. "I thought paying bills, Working late, chasing goals meant I was doing right by my daughter. Then one night she asked me, "Why do I only see you in pictures, Daddy?" His voice cracked slightly. She was 4. She wasn't angry, just curious, like she had already accepted it. Rachel stayed quiet, her throat tight. That night I sat outside her room for an hour. Just watched her sleep. Didn't go in. And I thought, what am I doing? He looked up now. I changed. Came home earlier. Read her stories. Ate cereal dinners. I don't take meetings after 6. I never leave without saying goodbye. Rachel looked at him. Really looked. She's lucky. I wasn't always the man she deserved, but I'm trying to become him. They let the silence stretch. Then Evan spoke again. You know why I noticed you that first night? Rachel raised an eyebrow. You didn't ask questions. You didn't want anything. But you treated something important with care. That's rare. She blinked. You show up, he said simply. Even when no one's watching. Rachel looked away, unsure what to do with the weight of those words. Being present isn't just about being there, Evan added. It's showing up for people. You've been showing up for your mom, for strangers, even for me. When she turned back, there was something different in her eyes, something cracked open. It's nice not having to carry it all alone, she said. He nodded. You never should have had to. And for one long moment, that quiet hallway in a faceless corporate building felt like the most honest place on earth. That night, Rachel didn't clean the 15th floor with urgency. She moved slower, thought deeper, held the paper cup longer before tossing it. Something had shifted. Things unsaid still lingered between them, but sometimes the most meaningful parts of a story are written between the lines. The next few nights slipped by like warm tea in cold hands, quiet, expected, and somehow sacred. Each night, Rachel found a fresh cup waiting on her cart. Sometimes peppermint, sometimes lavender, sometimes sleepy time blend. Each one bore a sticky note in that careful, almost architectural handwriting. Too much caffeine is bad for cleaning accuracy. May this tea protect you from rogue copy machines. Still no dragons, but hope lives. Rachel replied in kind. Napkins, coffee sleeves, backsides of shift logs, her own handwriting small, looping, with smudged corners and ink blots. Your tea diplomacy skills are improving. Tell Julia her dragon needs flying lessons. Thank you for remembering I exist. They didn't talk every night, not in person. Sometimes he wasn't there. Sometimes she wasn't in the mood. But always, there was something left. Notes, cups, a quiet rhythm. On a Thursday after a long and unusually grueling shift, Rachel found something new. The cup wasn't tea. It was cocoa. Slightly bitter, a hint of cinnamon. Taped to it was a small drawing, crayon on index card, a dragon curled around a book. The caption read, in clumsy block letters, for your inner night. Rachel sat down on the floor next to the vending machine and let herself smile. She didn't see Evan that night. The next evening she brought a book. Thin paperback, worn spine, a little tape on the corner. She found him waiting, usual spot, hoodie sleeves pushed up, thumbing through his phone. He looked up as she approached and straightened instinctively. She held the book out. For Julia, she said. He blinked and took it gently. The cover read, Bedtime Tales for Brave Girls. Inside the front page, a child's name had once been written in pencil. Almost faded now. Evan's voice was low. She'll love this. Rachel smiled, soft and shy. It's second-hand, but the stories are still whole. He looked at her, really looked. Not like someone trying to see, but like someone finally letting themselves be seen. Thank you, he said. No irony, no flair. Just the words, honest. They didn't sit long. No long talks, no teasing notes. Rachel returned to her shift. Evan lingered for a moment, book still in hand. Later, at the janitor's break room, Rachel warmed a cup of soup in the microwave. She was tired. Bone tired. The TV above hummed with news loops and muted sports. She almost didn't hear it. Evan Marshall, CEO of Marshall Tech, announced today. She turned her head slowly. There he was, on screen. Behind a podium, navy suit, crisp shirt, calm and poised. She stared. Flashes of boardrooms, ribbon cuttings, photos with smiling investors. Then another photo, a candid one. Evan kneeling beside a little girl in a white dress, both laughing beneath falling balloons. Julia. Rachel's hands dropped to her sides, her chest hollowed. It was him, the man who left notes, who remembered tea, but also the CEO. And suddenly the paper cup in her hand felt heavier than it should. He had never lied, but he hadn't told her either, not who he was, not what he was. She left her soup in the microwave and walked out. The next night she skipped the 15th floor, and the next, and the next. But still, every shift, a teacup appeared, carefully placed, always warm. No note, no name, just tea, like he was still showing up, even when she wouldn't. Rain tapped softly on the windows as Rachel stepped out of the service elevator, eyes pointedly avoiding the hallway to the 15th floor. She told herself it was better this way, cleaner, safer. But the teacups kept appearing, no matter how she changed her route or adjusted her shift. Each night, one would be waiting, balanced just so on the edge of her cart. Still warm. Still steeped with care. No messages. No drawings. Just silence. And that silence, once comforting, now stretched long and loud. It was the silence of things unsaid, and the ache of something broken without ceremony. Rachel buried herself in the work. She started cleaning faster, harder. Her shoulders ached, her hands cracked. She stayed busy long after her shift ended, pretending the stillness wasn't calling her. But even busy hands can't quiet a loud heart. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Still, the tea came. Until one morning, just after 4 a.m., Rachel stepped out into the gray chill of pre-dawn Portland and nearly missed him. He was seated on the concrete steps outside the employee exit. Same hoodie, same sneakers. His elbows rested on his knees, head bent low like he'd been there for hours. When he looked up, their eyes met. He stood slowly, no sudden movements. "I've been waiting here since midnight," Evan said, voice low. Rachel's arms crossed. "You shouldn't have." "I know," he replied, "but I had to see you." She didn't say anything, just stood there, chest tight. He took a cautious step forward. "I didn't lie to you, Rachel. I just didn't say everything." She stayed still. "For once, I wasn't Evan Marshall, CEO of Marshall Tech. I wasn't the headline or the handshake or the tailored suit. I was just a man who couldn't sleep,
sitting next to a woman who made the night feel less lonely. Rachel exhaled shakily. You let me believe you were someone else. I let you believe I was someone simple, he said gently, because being with you made me feel like I could be. Her throat tightened. So, what was it then? A test? No, Evan said quickly. It wasn't a test, it was real. Every moment, every cup, every napkin note. I didn't plan it, I just didn't want it to stop. Rachel looked away. Evan took a breath. My wife died when Julia was 3. Sudden illness. One day she was laughing over pancakes, the next, gone. Rachel's face softened despite herself. After that, Julia stopped speaking. For 4 months. Not a word. Just crayons and silence. He paused, swallowed. I threw everything at it. Therapists, puppets, music. Nothing worked. Then one night I came home late, again, and found her asleep in the hallway, curled around a picture of her mom. And I knew she didn't need a nanny or a check. She needed me. He looked up, eyes raw. She started speaking again when I started laughing again, and I started laughing again when I met you. Rachel didn't move. Couldn't. Then Evan reached into his jacket, pulled out something wrapped in tissue. He held it out. I'm not asking for anything. Just for you to see. Rachel took it slowly, unwrapped it. It was the book. Bedtime Tales for Brave Girls. But now it was covered in stickers. Crayon marks filled the margins. A napkin was folded between pages as a bookmark. And inside the front cover, beneath her faded handwriting, was a new message in purple crayon. Daddy and I love this one the most. Julia. Rachel stared at it, throat thick. Evan stepped back. I'm not here to win you back. I'm just here to tell the truth. Because what we had, it wasn't pretend. It mattered. It still does. He hesitated. And maybe, if you're willing, she'd love to hear your stories again. He didn't wait for a response. Just nodded, then turned and walked away into the soft morning rain. Rachel stood on the steps for a long time, the book still warm in her hands. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel angry. She just felt seen. She stayed there as the sky shifted from slate to pearl, and something inside her whispered, this wasn't the end. Not yet. The phone buzzed in Rachel's pocket 3 days later. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. Most of her unknown calls were either debt collectors or wrong numbers. But something about the timing, the quiet of the morning, the stillness in her apartment, made her answer. Hello? A pause, then a small voice. Miss Rachel. Rachel froze. Yes? It's Julia, the voice said. My daddy said you tell better stories than books. Can you come today? Rachel closed her eyes. She hadn't heard that name out loud since Evan walked away in the rain. Since she held that worn book with scribbled hearts and felt everything shift again. You don't have to, Julia said quickly, her voice shaking. But Daddy's been sad. He tries to smile, but it's not real. The line went quiet. Rachel looked around her apartment. The light through the blinds painted the room in gold stripes. The air smelled of lavender from the tea she had brewed and let cool on the counter. And suddenly, everything inside her quieted. I'll come, she whispered.
An hour later, she stood in front of a townhouse painted soft blue, with marigolds dancing in the breeze. The steps were cracked, the wind chime above the porch tangled. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Julia ran out like she'd been waiting for hours. Rachel knelt instinctively, and the girl threw herself into her arms.
"I missed you,"
Julia said, voice muffled against Rachel's sweater.
"I missed you too, little lion."
Behind them, Evan stood in the doorway. No hoodie, just a soft button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He didn't say anything, just watched them, his eyes soft.
"Hi,"
Rachel said.
"Hi,"
Evan replied, his voice rough. The house was warm in the way lived-in homes are, cluttered but comforting. Toys were tucked into corners, drawings taped to the fridge. A hand-scrawled note read, "My family," with 3 uneven stick figures. Rachel sat on the couch, Julia curled up beside her, clutching a book. "You ready?" Rachel asked. Julia nodded. Rachel opened the book and began. Once upon a time, there was a small, fierce girl who lived in a very tall castle. She gave each character a voice. The dragon snorted. The king muttered. Julia giggled and leaned closer. Evan didn't speak. He sat on the floor beside them, arms on his knees, listening. When the story ended, Julia clapped once, then yawned.
"She likes you,"
Evan said softly. Rachel looked down.
"I like her too."
Julia nestled into Rachel's side and mumbled,
"Daddy smiles more since he met you."
Rachel froze. Evan looked down, hands clasped loosely. The words hung in the space like soft lanterns.
"I think he helped me smile too,"
Rachel said at last. She stood slowly, Julia still curled against her. Their eyes met. No more masks, no misunderstandings, just presence. Rachel held out her hand. Evan took it. No apologies, no promises, just a quiet beginning. And that was enough. 1 year later, the bookstore stood on the corner of Hawthorne and 34th, nestled between a laundromat and an old bakery that still sold bread by the loaf. Its windows were slightly fogged from the inside. The hand-painted sign above the door read, "Quiet Chapter." Below that, in soft gold paint, "A place for pages, peace, and people who stay." Inside, the scent of lavender tea and old books floated through the air. The lighting was soft, the furniture mismatched but inviting. Cushioned chairs, low wooden tables, a soft rug with faded stars. In one corner, a chalkboard read, "Today's specials, lemon balm tea, apricot scones, story hour at 6. Rachel stood behind the counter in a green apron, a light smudge of flour on her cheek. She looked tired, but her eyes glowed. She checked the clock. Almost 7. Right on cue, the bell above the door jingled. He walked in like he had every evening for the past 6 months. Same hoodie, same smile. Evan brushed snow off his sleeves, glanced around the room until his eyes found hers. "Hey," he said. "Back for dish duty?" Rachel teased, handing him a towel. "Wouldn't miss it." He stepped behind the counter, rolled up his sleeves, and began drying cups with practiced ease. Rachel leaned back against the sink. "You know, you're ruining your mysterious CEO reputation. Most executives don't do dishes in hoodies." Evan grinned. "Guess I'm not most executives." They worked in companionable silence, the clink of mugs and the hum of soft jazz filling the space. After a while, Evan reached into his pocket. "I've been holding on to this," he said, and opened his palm. The old keychain. Still slightly bent, still worn. But now, it had something new.
A second charm, a small silver book engraved on one side. Rachel took it, examining the inscription inside. "Come home safe, all three of us." She looked up at him, stunned. "I wasn't looking for a fairy tale," Evan said softly. "Not after everything. But if you'll have us, not just for stories, but for all the chapters that follow, I'm here. For every one of them." Rachel didn't cry. She smiled, soft and steady. "I never wanted a fairy tale," she replied. "Just someone who stays." He stepped forward, slid the keychain into her hand. Their fingers lingered. Across the room, Julia looked up from a picture book. She grinned. "Are you going to kiss, or do I have to turn the page myself?" They both laughed, really laughed, and pulled her into the hug. Outside, the snow fell gently. Inside, a new story had already begun. And this one, they'd write together. Spring brought sunlight through the bookstore windows, soft and golden, painting patches on the hardwood floors like old quilt squares. Customers trickled in, some for books, others just for the quiet. Rachel had added a new shelf labeled Staff Picks. It was filled with stories about resilience, second chances, and found family. Each book had a handwritten note tucked into its spine, quotes that had stayed with her. Evan noticed. "You added quotes now?" he asked one afternoon, leaning against the counter with his sleeves rolled to his elbows. Rachel didn't look up from restocking tea jars. "People remember lines more than summaries." "I remember the line you left on a napkin," he replied. "Thank you for remembering I exist." Her hands stilled. He reached over and gently covered hers. "You don't have to say it again. You've shown it every day since." Julia burst through the door with a backpack sliding off her shoulders and a dandelion crown tangled in her curls. "Story hour," she announced. Evan grinned. "Who's the dragon today?" "You are," Julia said without hesitation. "Again?" Rachel laughed. "You do have the voice for it." That evening, the reading nook was filled with pillows and kids in sock feet. Rachel read aloud while Evan did exaggerated voices from the floor, making Julia giggle until she had hiccups. Later, when the store emptied and the tea had gone cold, Rachel and Evan sat alone in the back room. He leaned his head against the wall. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't picked up that keychain?" Rachel nodded slowly. "I think I would have kept walking. Because back then I thought nothing I did mattered." Evan turned to her. "But it did." She looked down at her hands. "It still scares me how close I came to never knowing this life existed." Evan reached into his coat pocket again. This time it wasn't a keychain. It was a tiny box. Rachel blinked. "Not that kind of box," he said quickly, chuckling. "Don't panic." Inside was a pin. Small, silver, shaped like an open book. Etched on the inside cover were 3 names: Rachel, Evan, Julia. "It's for your apron," he said. Rachel smiled and pinned it to her chest, over her heart. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady. Inside, they sat quietly. Some roots take time to grow. Some stories need pauses. And love, real love, sometimes whispers before it sings. Summer arrived with longer days, louder evenings, and busier weekends at the shop. Quiet Chapter no longer felt like a secret. Word had spread about the lavender tea, the handmade bookmarks, the story hours that ran over time because no one wanted them to end. Rachel noticed it in the way the chairs filled faster, in the soft conversations that lingered even after closing.
She saw it in the chalk smudges left by children's drawings near the reading rug, and in how the light stayed on longer each night. Not just the lamps, but something inside her. One Friday, they hosted their first open mic night. The folding chairs were mismatched and the mic squealed twice before Evan figured out how to fix it. Julia stood in the front row with a paper crown made of receipt paper and cheered every reader, even the nervous teenager who barely looked up from her notebook. When it was Rachel's turn, she stood behind the mic and looked out at a room full of strangers who no longer felt like strangers. She didn't read a poem or a quote. She told a story about a lost keychain, a late night, a hallway with too much silence, and the man who stood quietly beside her until the silence softened. When she finished, no one clapped right away. The moment was too full. Then Julia clapped once, and that was enough to break the stillness into gentle applause. After, Evan met her near the back door. "You've never told that story out loud," he said. "I was waiting until it belonged to both of us," she replied. They walked home that night with Julia skipping ahead, her arms outstretched like airplane wings. Later, after Julia had fallen asleep with glitter glue still on her hands, Rachel and Evan sat on the front porch, watching the stars blink awake. Evan passed her a cup of chamomile. "Still your favorite?" "Always." He rested his arm on the back of her chair. "Do you ever think we'll forget what it felt like? Those nights in the hallway?" Rachel shook her head. "No, because they built this." A pause. Then Evan said, "I'm thinking about stepping back from the company." Rachel blinked. "Really?" "I don't want to miss anything. Not Julia's questions, not your laughs, not another story hour." She didn't respond right away, just leaned against him. "I think you're allowed to choose joy," she whispered. He nodded. The lights inside the house glowed behind them. Books were still stacked on the table. A teacup left unwashed. A dragon drawing hung crookedly on the fridge. Rachel looked at it and smiled. "Maybe the life we dreamed of wasn't about escape," she said. "Maybe it was just about staying in the moment long enough to let it grow." Evan turned to her. "And you think we've grown?" She nodded. "We're still growing. Every day we choose each other. That's what matters." He reached for her hand, and this time, they didn't let go. Autumn crept into Portland with crisp air, golden leaves, and the scent of cinnamon lingering in shop windows. Inside Quiet Chapter, the walls were cozier than ever. New books arrived in boxes tied with string, and Julia was tall enough now to help shelve them. She still wore her paper crowns, but now she added stickers to her employee in training badge and bossed around anyone who wandered near the kids section. One evening, Rachel found her sitting in the reading nook, carefully gluing tissue paper onto a poster. It read, "1 year anniversary," in crooked, colorful letters. Evan peeked over her shoulder and grinned. "Your art director is thorough." "She takes after her dad," Rachel replied, placing a kiss on his cheek. The bookstore's anniversary felt less like a celebration and more like a deep breath, a moment to reflect. Patrons brought cards, neighbors dropped off scones, and Julia handed out handmade bookmarks with glitter that never quite came off. As twilight settled, Rachel stood by the counter and looked around. A woman browsed fiction near the window. An older man helped his granddaughter pick a book about dinosaurs. A teenager in a hoodie read quietly in the poetry section. This wasn't just a bookstore. It was proof that soft beginnings could bloom, that stories could be lived, not just read. Later that night, after the last light had been dimmed and Julia had fallen asleep in a pile of beanbags, Evan and Rachel sat beneath a string of paper lanterns in the back patio. She wore his sweater. He held her hand like it anchored him. "We made it," he said softly. Rachel looked at him. "No, we're making it. Every day." He smiled. "You know, I used to think my legacy would be tech. Buildings. Deals. And now? Now I think it might be bedtime stories and tea leaves." Rachel leaned into him, heart warm. Outside, the wind stirred the vines along the fence. Inside, the house was full of little things, scribbled notes, warm mugs, and laughter tucked into corners. And for once, they weren't waiting for the next page. They were writing it. Together.